The cargo transport Meridian's dream shuddered violently. As it broke through the atmosphere of Kepler-4 to be, its hull screaming against the alien air. Elena Vasquez gripped her safety harness, her knuckles white as the ship bucked and rolled like a wild animal. Sparks flew from control panels, and the acrid smell of burning circuits filled the cramped passenger compartment. "Hold on," shouted the pilot, but his words were lost in the deafening roar of failing engines. Elena squeezed her eyes shut, thinking of the botanical samples in the cargo hold 3 years of research. From the outer rim colonies, now likely to become scattered debris across this unknown world. She was a civilian contractor, just hitching a ride back to Earth when the ship's hyperdrive had malfunctioned, pulling them out of faster-than-light travel in this remote system. The impact came like a thunderclap. Elena's world went black. She awoke to silence, broken only by the distant crackling of fires and the soft hiss of escaping atmosphere. Pain lanced through her shoulder as she struggled against her restraints. The passenger compartment had been torn open like a metal flower, revealing a rust-colored sky streaked with purple clouds. "Hello," she called out, her voice hoarse. "Anyone?" A groan answered her from across the wreckage. Elena turned to see a figure stirring among the twisted metal, tall, humanoid, but clearly not human. His skin held a subtle blue-green tint, and intricate silver markings traced along his temples. This was Kefnor, she remembered, the navigator from Thyros who had boarded at the last station. "Are you injured?" Elena asked, finally freeing herself from her restraints and stumbling toward him. Kefnor's large, violet eyes focused on her with difficulty. "I function adequately," he replied in careful standard, though his accent made the words musical. "The others?" Elena's heart sank as she looked around the compartment. She could see the pilot's station, crushed beyond recognition. The ship had carried 12 passengers and crew. Now, as she and Kefnor checked each section of the wreckage, they found only bodies. "We are alone," Kefnor said quietly, his translator device crackling with damage. The reality hit Elena like a physical blow. Stranded on an unknown world with an alien she barely knew, surrounded by the bodies of their fellow travelers, she sank to her knees beside a piece of twisted hull, suddenly overwhelmed by the magnitude of their situation. "The distress beacon," she said suddenly. Remembering protocol, did it activate? Kefnor was already moving toward the remains of the communications ray, his long fingers dancing over the controls with practiced efficiency. After several minutes, he shook his head grimly. "The transmitter is destroyed. The beacon." He paused, checking readings on a damaged display. It may have sent one pulse before impact, but the range would be limited. Elena felt her hope deflating. They were in an unexplored system, far from regular shipping lanes. Even if someone received the distress signal, it could be months before a rescue ship arrived if one came at all. "We need to assess our resources," she said, forcing herself to think practically. Years of field research had taught her that panic was the enemy of survival. Food, water, shelter, medical supplies. Kefnor nodded, seeming to appreciate her systematic approach. "I will examine the cargo bay. You should treat your injury first." Elena looked down at her shoulder, surprised to see blood seeping through her jumpsuit. The adrenaline had masked the pain, but now she felt it throbbing insistently. As she rummaged through an emergency kit, she watched Kefnor work with fluid efficiency, his movements precise despite his obvious exhaustion. The Thyrosian was an enigma to her. His people were known as skilled navigators and engineers, highly valued in the galactic community, but they rarely interacted with humans beyond professional necessity. Elena had heard they were cold, logical beings who viewed emotions as weaknesses. Yet she had seen something flicker in his violet eyes when they discovered the bodies, something that looked distinctly like grief. "The water recyclers are damaged, but repairable," Kefnor reported as he returned from the cargo bay. "We have enough emergency rations for perhaps 10 days if we are conservative. The atmospheric processors indicate the air is breathable, though thinner than optimal." "What about shelter?" Elena asked, applying a bandage to her wound. Kefnor gestured toward the intact rear section of the ship. "The passenger quarters remain partially sealed. We can make them habitable." As the alien sun began to set, painting the barren landscape, in shades of copper and gold. Elena and Kethnor worked together to clear debris from the least damaged compartment. The work was awkward at first. Their body languages were completely different, and they kept inadvertently blocking each other's movements. Your people build differently, Kethnor observed as Elena struggled with a piece of equipment designed for his taller frame. Everything's built for humans where I come from, Elena replied, wiping sweat from her brow. I guess I never thought about how inconvenient that must be for other species. Something shifted in Kethnor's expression, surprise, perhaps, that she had considered his perspective at all. As night fell, they sat in their improvised shelter, sharing a meal of emergency rations by the light of a salvaged lantern. The silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of their circumstances. Elena found herself studying her companion's face, noting how the lantern light caught the silver markings on his skin, making them shimmer like liquid mercury. How long can your people survive without rescue? She asked quietly. Thyrosians are resilient, Kethnor replied carefully, but this world appears hostile. The temperature drops significantly at night, and I detected several large predator species on the scanners before we crashed. Elena nodded, pulling her jacket tighter around herself. Already, she could feel the cold seeping through the damaged hull. We'll need to take turns keeping watch, agreed. Kethnor paused, then added with what might have been reluctance, Elena Vasquez. I must inform you that my translator was damaged in the crash. My command of standard is limited without technological assistance. That's okay, Elena said, surprised by her own sincerity. We'll figure it out as we go. For the first time since the crash, Kethnor's stern expression softened slightly. It was barely perceptible, but Elena caught at a crack in the armor of Thyrosian stoicism. Outside their fragile shelter, the wind howled across the alien landscape, carrying with it the promise of the challenges that lay ahead. But inside, two beings from different worlds had taken the first tentative steps toward understanding each other, united by necessity and the fundamental drive to survive. Neither could have imagined that this crash, this tragedy that had claimed so many lives, would become the beginning of something unprecedented, a love that would bridge not just the gap between species, but the vast emptiness of space itself. The harsh dawn light of Kepler-44 to be filtered through the cracks in their makeshift shelter, waking Elena from a restless sleep. Her body ached from lying on the hard metal floor, and the cold had seeped into her bones despite the thermal blankets they'd salvaged. Across the small space, Kethnor sat motionless in what she assumed was meditation, his violet eyes closed and his breathing slow and rhythmic. Good morning, she whispered, not wanting to startle him. His eyes opened immediately, focusing on her with an alertness that suggested he hadn't been sleeping at all. The atmospheric readings indicated as indeed morning by local standards, he replied formally, then seemed to catch himself. Good morning, Elena. She smiled at his careful pronunciation of the human greeting. Did you sleep? Thyrosians require less rest than humans, he said, beginning to pack their meager supplies. I used the time to monitor our perimeter. There were sounds in the night, large creatures moving beyond the wreckage. Elena's stomach dropped. Dangerous, unknown. We should locate a more defensible position. Kethnor paused, studying her face. But first, we must find water. The recyclers will not last long. They emerged from their shelter into the alien landscape, and Elena gasped at the sight that greeted them. In daylight, Kepler-440b revealed itself as a world of stark beauty. Towering crystalline formations jutted from the rust-colored earth like frozen lightning, while strange, tree-like organisms with translucent trunks swayed in the distance. The sky was a pale lavender, crossed by the wispy trails of high-altitude clouds. It's incredible, Elena breathed, her botanist sigh immediately cataloging the unusual flora. Kethnor followed her gaze, his expression unreadable. Your people find beauty in the unknown, don't yours? Elena asked, surprised by the question. Thyrosians value efficiency, functionality. He seemed to struggle with the words. Beauty is a luxury we cannot afford. Elena felt a pang of sympathy for him. What must it be like to live in a culture that denied itself wonder? She made a mental note to show him some of the planet's marvels as they explored. Their first priority was water. and they set off in different directions to cover more ground. Elena headed toward what looked like a dried riverbed, while Kefnor investigated a series of caves in a nearby cliff face. They agreed to stay within shouting distance and check in every hour. The search proved frustrating. Elena found only dust and crystallized mineral deposits where water had once flowed. The alien plants seemed to survive on moisture drawn from deep underground, their root systems extending far below the surface. She was about to give up when she heard Kefnor calling her name. "Elena, come quickly." She hurried toward his voice, finding him standing at the mouth of a cave. His entire demeanor changed. There was excitement in his violet eyes, the first real emotion she'd seen him display. "What is it?" she asked, breathless from running across the rocky terrain. Instead of answering, Kefnor led her into the cave. As they moved deeper into the shadows, Elena began to notice a soft, blue-green glow emanating from the walls. But it wasn't until they rounded a corner that she saw the source. Kefnor himself was glowing. The silver markings on his skin had come alive with bioluminescent light, pulsing gently in rhythm with his heartbeat. The effect was breathtaking, turning him into a living constellation against the dark stone. "Your people glow?" Elena asked in wonder. Kefnor's light dimmed slightly, and she sensed embarrassment. "It is an involuntary response to certain mineral compositions. The caves contain crystals similar to those on Thyros. I cannot control it. It's beautiful," Elena said softly, and watched his markings flare brighter at her words. Deeper in the cave, they found what they were looking for, a clear spring bubbling up from deep underground. Elena knelt and cupped the water in her hands, testing it carefully before taking a small sip. It was clean and surprisingly sweet. "This will sustain us," Kefnor said, his glow casting dancing shadows on the cave walls as he bent to fill their containers. As they worked, Elena found herself stealing glances at him. The bioluminescence transformed his austere features, making him seem less alien and more magical. When he caught her looking, she felt heat rise in her cheeks. "The light," she said, trying to cover her embarrassment. "Does it serve a purpose?" "On your world, communication," Kefnor replied, his patterns shifting subtly as he spoke. "Emotional states, navigation in our deep cities." He paused, then added quietly, "It also indicates compatibility. Compatibility for mating," he said bluntly, then seemed to realize how that sounded. "I mean, for reproduction among my people, the patterns must harmonize." Elena felt her face burning now, but she was fascinated despite her embarrassment. "What do your patterns say now?" Kefnor went very still, his glow dimming to almost nothing. That would be inappropriate to discuss. Over the following days, they established a routine. Mornings were spent gathering food. Elena proved surprisingly adept at identifying edible plants, while Kefnor's enhanced senses helped them avoid the dangerous ones. Afternoons were dedicated to improving their shelter and salvaging useful materials from the crash site. Evenings became Elena's favorite time. As they sat by their small fire, sharing their meager meals, Kefnor began to open up. His formal speech patterns relaxed, and she started to see glimpses of the person beneath the cultural conditioning. "Tell me about earth plants," he requested. One night, his curiosity evident despite his attempts to seem disinterested, Elena's face lit up. "Oh, there are so many. Roses that smell like heaven, trees that turn brilliant colors in autumn, flowers that only bloom under the full moon." She gestured enthusiastically as she spoke, painting pictures with her words. Kefnor listened intently, his markings pulsing with soft blue light. "Your world sounds vibrant." "It is, but so is this one, in its own way." Elena gestured toward the crystalline formations visible through their shelter's opening. "Those formations there, they're not just beautiful, they're alive. I've been watching them, and they grow in response to the planet's magnetic field. They're like crystal forests that dance with cosmic forces. You see life where Thyrosians would see only mineral structures," Kefnor observed. "Maybe that's what your people are missing," Elena said gently. "Life isn't just about survival and efficiency. It's about connection, wonder, growth." Kefnor was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. "On Thyros, emotional connections are considered weaknesses. They cloud judgment. create inefficiencies, but they also create strength, Elena countered. Love, friendship, hope, these things give us reasons to fight, to survive, to become better than we were. His bioluminescent patterns shifted, taking on warmer hues. You speak of love as if it is a force of nature, isn't it? Elena smiled. Like gravity or electromagnetism, invisible but undeniably powerful. That night, as they took turns keeping watch, Elena found herself thinking about the way Kefnor's eyes had softened when she spoke about love. There was something there, beneath his cultural programming, something yearning to break free. When it was her turn to sleep, she dreamed of dancing lights and gentle violet eyes. She woke to find Kefnor sitting beside her, his hand hovering just above her shoulder as if he'd been about to wake. Heard from a nightmare. You were distressed, he explained, pulling his hand back quickly. Your breathing became irregular. Just a dream, Elena murmured, though she was acutely aware of how close he was. How his bioluminescent markings cast a soft glow over both of them, Elena, he said quietly, and something in his tone made her look up at him. I must tell you something. Since the crash, my patterns have been unstable, showing things I do not understand. What kind of things? He hesitated, then said in a rush, compatibility patterns with you. But this should not be possible between different species. Elena's heart began to race. Maybe, she said carefully, your people's understanding of compatibility is too narrow. Kefnor's markings flared bright, then dimmed to almost nothing. Such thoughts are forbidden on Thyros. But we're not on Thyros, Elena pointed out gently. We're here, alone, with nothing but each other and whatever truth exists between us. For a moment, they stared at each other in the soft glow of his bioluminescence. Elena could see the war being fought behind his violet eyes, duty versus desire, conditioning versus genuine feeling. Finally, Kefnor reached out and touched her hand with one finger. His skin was warm, and his markings pulsed in a slow, hypnotic rhythm. Perhaps, he said quietly, it is time I learned what it means to be more than merely functional. Elena smiled and gently intertwined their fingers. Round them, the alien night sang with distant sounds, but for the first time since the crash, neither of them felt alone. 3 weeks had passed since the crash, and Elena barely recognized the world they now inhabited. What had once seemed like a barren wasteland had revealed itself to be a complex ecosystem, teeming with subtle life. She and Kefnor had developed an easy rhythm of survival, their initial awkwardness replaced by an intuitive understanding of each other's movements and needs. Elena woke that morning to find Kefnor already gone from their shared shelter. This had become his habit, rising before dawn to scout their perimeter and check the water supply. She found him by the spring, his tall frame silhouetted against the pale morning light, and felt that now familiar flutter in her chest at the sight of him. Any signs of the storm? She asked, referring to the massive weather system they'd been tracking on their salvaged instruments. It will reach us by evening, Kefnor replied, turning to face her. His bioluminescent markings were dim in the daylight, but she could still make out their intricate patterns. We should gather additional supplies and secure the shelter. As they worked throughout the day, Elena found herself stealing glances at her companion. Over the weeks, she'd learned to read the subtle changes in his posture and expression that indicated his moods. The rigid formality he'd maintained in their early days together had gradually given way to something more natural, more genuinely him. Elena, he said during their midday rest, may I ask you something of a personal nature? She looked up from the alien fruit she was examining, a translucent, star-shaped thing that tasted like honey and cinnamon. Of course, your family on Earth, do they worry for you? Elena's expression softened. I hope so. My parents died when I was young, but I have a sister, Carla. She's probably driving the search and rescue teams crazy, demanding updates. She smiled sadly. What about you? Do you have family on Thyros? Kefnor's markings dimmed. A response she'd learned indicated discomfort or sadness. Thyrosians do not form emotional attachments as humans do. I was raised in the communal nurseries, trained for my profession from childhood. Individual relationships are considered inefficient. That sounds lonely, Elena said gently. One cannot miss what one has never experienced, Kefnor replied. But there was something hollow in his voice that suggested otherwise. The storm hit just as the alien sun was setting, bringing with it winds that howled like living things and rain that fell in sheets of liquid silver. Elena and Kefnor huddled in their reinforced shelter, listening to the debris from the crash site being scattered across the landscape outside. "It's like the planet is trying to erase all evidence we were ever here," Elena murmured, pulling her thermal blanket closer around herself. "Perhaps that is for the best," Kefnor said quietly. "We are intruders in this ecosystem, are we?" Elena turned to face him in the dim glow of their emergency lighting. "Or are we just part of the story now?" Before he could answer, a particularly violent gust of wind struck their shelter, causing one of the support beams to buckle. The structure groaned ominously, and Elena instinctively moved closer to Kefnor. His arm came around her shoulders, in a protective gesture that seemed as natural as breathing. "I will not allow harm to come to you," he said fiercely, and Elena felt something shift between them, a breaking down of the last barriers they'd maintained. "Kefnor," she whispered, looking up into his violet eyes. "What's happening to us?" His free hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing along her cheekbone with infinite gentleness. "I do not know," he admitted, "but I find myself caring for your well-being beyond what logic dictates. Your happiness has become important to me. Your pain causes me distress. That sounds like love," Elena said softly. "Is that what this is?" His bioluminescent markings began to pulse with a warm, golden light. "This feeling that you have become essential to my existence," instead of answering with words. Elena leaned up and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if they were both afraid of breaking something precious. But when Kefnor responded, his arms tightening around her, the kiss deepened into something that spoke of weeks of growing attraction and barely restrained desire. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily. Kefnor's entire body was glowing now, his markings shifting through a spectrum of colors Elena had never seen before. "Your patterns," she whispered in wonder. "They're beautiful. They respond to you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Since the day we met, they have shown colors that do not exist in Thyrosian biology. You have changed me, Elena. At a cellular level, you have changed me." Elena's hands came up to trace the glowing patterns on his chest, marveling at the way they brightened under her touch. "Show me," she whispered. "Show me how they respond." What followed was a slow, careful exploration of each other's bodies, guided by wonder rather than desperation. Kefnor's skin was warm and smooth, his alien anatomy both familiar and excitingly different. His hands were reverent as they mapped the curves of her body, his bioluminescence creating a private galaxy of light around them. "You are so beautiful," he murmured against her throat, his accent making the words sound like a prayer. "Your skin is like starlight." Elena arched beneath his touch, amazed by the gentleness in his powerful hands. "Your people were wrong," she gasped as his mouth found the sensitive spot behind her ear. "This isn't weakness, this is strength." When they finally came together, it was with a sense of completion that neither had expected. Elena felt as if she were merging not just with Kefnor's body, but with his very essence. His bioluminescent patterns pulsed in perfect synchronization with her heartbeat, creating a feedback loop of sensation and emotion that left them both trembling. "Elena." He breathed her name like a benediction as they moved together in perfect harmony. "My heart. I think you have awakened my heart." "Mine too," she whispered, lost in the warm glow of his alien light and the depth of feeling in his violet eyes. "I love you, Kefnor. I love all of you." Afterwards, they lay entwined in the soft glow of his subsiding bioluminescence, listening to the storm rage outside their shelter. Elena traced lazy patterns on his chest, marveling at how right this felt, how complete. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "When rescue comes, I mean." Kefnor's arms tightened around her. "I do not know Thyrosians who form attachments to other species. It is not forbidden, but it is not accepted either. They would likely reassign me to deep space missions, far from inhabited worlds. And I'd go back to Earth," Elena said, her heart sinking. "To my job, my old life, perhaps." Kefnor said carefully, "We do not have to make that choice immediately. Perhaps we can simply be here, now, together, Elena smiled and tilted her head up to kiss him again. I like that philosophy. It is very unthyrosian of me, he admitted with what might have been a smile. You are teaching me to be inefficient. Good, Elena laughed. Efficiency is overrated. As the storm gradually subsided outside, they talked through the night, about their worlds, their dreams, their fears about the future. Elena told him about Earth's oceans and forests, while Kethnor described the underwater cities of Thyros with their bioluminescent architecture. They spoke of books and music, of scientific discoveries and philosophical questions. I wish I could show you a sunset on Earth, Elena said as the alien dawn began to filter through their shelter. The way the light turns the clouds into gold and crimson, and I wish I could show you the song gardens of Thyros, Kethnor replied. Plants that create music when the thermal vents release their gases. It is beautiful, I think, though I was never supposed to notice such things. We'll see each other's worlds someday, Elena said with fierce determination. Whatever happens, we'll find a way. Kethnor's markings pulsed with a soft, hopeful blue. Yes, he said simply. We will, as they drifted off to sleep in each other's arms. Neither could have imagined that the future held far more complexity than either of their worlds could have prepared them for. But for now, in their small shelter on an alien world, they had found something that transcended species, culture, and the vast distances between stars. They had found love. 6 weeks had transformed their crash site from a scene of devastation into something resembling a home. Elena stood at the entrance to their expanded shelter, watching Kethnor work on their latest project. A communications array cobbled together. From salvaged ship components and crystalline formations they discovered deeper in the cave system. His bioluminescent markings pulsed in steady concentration as his long fingers manipulated the delicate circuitry. Elena had learned to read his light patterns like a second language right now. They showed focused determination mixed with underlying contentment. The sight made her smile. Even as a wave of nausea suddenly swept over her, she gripped the doorframe, breathing deeply until the sensation passed. It was the third time this week she'd felt queasy, and a suspicion had been growing in her mind that she'd been trying to dismiss. Elena, Kethnor's voice carried concern as he looked up from his work. Are you unwell? Just tired, she said, forcing a smile. How's the transmitter coming along? The quantum resonance is still unstable, he replied, but his violet eyes remained fixed on her face with obvious worry. Perhaps you should rest. I'm fine, really. Elena moved to sit beside him, studying the complex array of alien and human technology. Explain it to me again. How does this work? Kethnor's expression brightened. He loved sharing technical knowledge with her, especially since she'd proven surprisingly adept at understanding Thyrosian engineering principles. The crystalline matrix amplifies our signal exponentially. If we can achieve stable resonance, we should be able to reach any ship within 50 light years. And how long until it's ready? Perhaps another week, if the power coupling holds. He paused, then added quietly, Are you certain you wish for rescue to come? Elena felt her heart clench at the vulnerable note in his voice. Over the past weeks, they'd both begun to dread the idea of returning to their separate worlds, their separate lives, here on Kepler-4 for to be. They existed in a bubble where their love made perfect sense. Out there, among their respective species, they would be an anomaly at best. I want us to survive, she said carefully, whatever that looks like. That evening, as they shared dinner by the light of Kethnor's gentle bioluminescence, Elena finally broached the subject that had been weighing on her mind. Kethnor, I need to ask you something important. She set down her cup of the herbal tea they'd learned to brew from local plants. What do you know about reproduction between different species? His markings immediately shifted to a pattern she'd learned indicated surprise and confusion. It should not be possible. The genetic differences are too vast. Should not be, Elena repeated. But is it impossible? Kethnor frowned, his scientific mind clearly working through the problem. There are theoretical cases, in the oldest archives, rare instances where compatible species could produce offspring, though such children would likely be sterile. He looked at her sharply. Why do you ask? Elena took a deep breath, her heart pounding. Because I think I might be pregnant. The Words hung in the air between them like a visible thing. Kefnor's bioluminescence went completely dark for a moment, then flared so bright it was almost blinding. "That is," he began, then stopped, seeming to struggle with the concept. "How certain are you?" "Pretty certain. All the signs are there: nausea, fatigue, and I missed my cycle 2 weeks ago." Elena watched his face carefully. "How do you feel about it?" Kefnor was quiet for so long that Elena began to worry. When he finally spoke, his voice was filled with wonder. "I feel terrified and amazed and impossibly happy." His hand found hers across their small table. "A child, our child. It changes everything." Elena said softly, "If I'm right, we can't just go back to our old lives. This child would need both of us." "Yes." Kefnor's grip on her hand tightened. "They would be the first of their kind, the bridge between our worlds." Over the following days, Kefnor threw himself into researching everything he could find in the ship's damaged database about interspecies reproduction. What he discovered was both encouraging and terrifying. "The genetic compatibility is theoretically possible," he reported, his bioluminescent patterns showing excitement mixed with concern. "But there are no documented cases of successful human Thyrosian offspring. We would be an experiment." "Our child would be an experiment," Elena corrected, one hand instinctively moving to her still flat stomach. "That's a lot of pressure to put on a little person. Or perhaps," Kefnor said gently, "they would be a miracle. Proof that love can transcend the boundaries of biology itself." As Elena's pregnancy became more apparent, they worked together to prepare for both rescue and parenthood. Kefnor's protective instincts seemed to intensify, and he insisted on doing most of the heavy work around their camp. His bioluminescent patterns had taken on new colors: warm golds and soft greens, that Elena had never seen before. "Your body is creating new light," she observed one evening as they sat together, her head resting on his shoulder. "Thyrosian males develop specific patterns when their mate is carrying," he explained, his hand resting gently on her growing belly. "I did not know it would happen with a human partner, but my body seems to have adapted." "What do the patterns mean?" "Protection, provision, joy." His voice was soft, love beyond measure. One morning, as Elena was tending to their small garden of domesticated alien plants, she felt the first flutter of movement in her womb. She gasped, her hand flying to her stomach. "Kefnor," she called, and he was at her side instantly, his markings blazing with alarm. "What is wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," Elena laughed, tears streaming down her face. "The baby moved. I felt them move." Kefnor's expression transformed into something Elena had never seen before: pure, overwhelming love and wonder. He knelt beside her, his hands hovering over her belly. "May I?" Elena guided his hands to the right spot, and they waited together, in breathless silence, until it happened again, a gentle flutter, like butterfly wings against their palms. "Our child," Kefnor whispered, his voice breaking. "They are real. They are alive." That night brought a breakthrough with the communications ray. The quantum resonance finally stabilized, and their signal burst out into space with enough power to reach inhabited systems. "It is done," Kefnor announced, though his tone was strangely subdued. "Help will come." Elena felt a mixture of relief and dread. Rescue meant survival for both her and their unborn child, but it also meant facing the reactions of both their species to their unprecedented relationship. "Are you ready for this?" she asked, taking his hand. "No," he admitted, "but ready or not, our story is about to become much larger than just the two of us." As if summoned by his words, their communications ray began receiving a response. A ship was indeed coming, and they would be rescued within days. Elena looked out at the alien landscape that had become their world, then at the man who had become everything to her. Whatever came next, they would face it together. They were no longer just Elena and Kefnor. They were a family, carrying within them the future of two worlds. The rescue ship Harmony's voice appeared as a silver speck against Kepler-440b's lavender sky, growing larger with each passing hour. Elena stood beside Kefnor at their observation post, her hand resting on her noticeably rounded belly, watching their isolation come to an end. "Second thoughts?" Kefnor asked quietly, his bioluminescent markings pulsing with nervous energy. Every minute, Elena admitted. But we can't raise our child alone on a hostile planet. They deserve a chance at a real life. At 4 months pregnant, Elena's condition was unmistakable. The pregnancy had progressed faster than human normal, and their child's hybrid nature was already manifesting in unexpected ways. Sometimes, when Kefnor's hand rested on her belly, faint patterns of light would flicker beneath her skin in response to his bioluminescence. The rescue team that descended from the ship was a mixed crew: 2 humans, a Thyrosian engineer, and what appeared to be a Centaurian medic. Elena felt her stomach knot with anxiety as they approached the landing site. She and Kefnor had prepared. Survivors Elena Vasquez and Kefnor called the human team leader, a woman with short gray hair and kind eyes. "I'm Captain Torres. We're here to take you home." "Thank you," Elena replied, stepping forward with Kefnor at her side. "We're ready to go." Captain Torres' gaze moved between them, taking in their obvious closeness and Elena's pregnant state. Her expression remained carefully neutral, but Elena caught the slight widening of her eyes. "We'll need to conduct medical evaluations before departure," Torres said professionally. "Standard procedure for extended survival situations." The medical examination took place aboard the rescue ship, and Elena found herself separated from Kefnor for the first time in months. The Centaurian medic, introduced as Dr. Vexhai, ran scan after scan with increasingly amazed expressions. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Vexhai finally said, therefore eyes blinking in sequence. "The genetic markers show clear evidence of both human and Thyrosian DNA, but somehow stabilized into a viable hybrid. How is this possible?" "Love," Elena said simply. "Love made it possible." Dr. Vexhai's expression suggested they found this explanation scientifically inadequate, but they made careful notes in their medical records nonetheless. Meanwhile, in another section of the ship, Kefnor underwent his own examination by the Thyrosian engineer, whose name was Zarnke. Unlike Dr. Vexhai's professional curiosity, Zarnke's demeanor was distinctly cold. "You have violated the biological purity protocols," Zarnke stated flatly, studying readouts from his scanner. "Thyrosian Council will require extensive debriefing upon your return." "I have violated nothing," Kefnor replied with quiet dignity. "I have found something beautiful and rare. I have found love." "You have found genetic contamination," Zarnke corrected. "This human female carries an abomination." Kefnor's bioluminescent patterns flared dangerous bright. "You will not speak of my mate or my child in such terms." The confrontation was interrupted by Captain Torres' arrival. "Is there a problem here?" "No problem," Kefnor said evenly, though his markings continued to pulse with barely contained anger. "We were merely discussing the scientific implications of our situation." Over the 3-day journey to the nearest starbase, Elena and Kefnor found themselves the subjects of intense curiosity, and, in some cases, hostility from the rescue crew. The 2 humans seemed fascinated by their story, asking endless questions about their survival and relationship. Dr. Vexhai maintained professional interest in the pregnancy's progression, but Zarnke's disapproval was a constant, uncomfortable presence. "You realize," Captain Torres said during a private conversation with Elena, "that your situation is going to attract significant attention. Interspecies relationships aren't unheard of, but successful reproduction, that's unprecedented." "What kind of attention?" Elena asked, though she suspected she already knew. "Scientific, political, media." Torres' expression was sympathetic. "Both your species' governments will want to study you and your child. They'll call it research. But we'll be specimens," Elena finished. "Laboratory subjects. I hope not, but you should be prepared for the possibility." That night, as they lay together in the small guest quarters they'd been assigned, Elena and Kefnor talked about their future with new urgency. "We could disappear," Kefnor suggested. "There are neutral worlds, places where we could raise our child in peace and spend our lives running." Elena shook her head. "Our child deserves better than that. They deserve to know both their heritages, to be proud of what they represent. Then we face whatever comes," Kefnor said, his hand finding hers in the darkness. Together, Elena agreed. The starbase where they docked was a massive, multi-species facility that served as a hub for diplomatic and scientific exchange. As soon as they disembarked, Elena and Kethnor found themselves surrounded by officials from both the Human Colonial Authority and the Thyrosian Science Collective. "Ms. Vasquez, Mr. Kethnor," said a human official with an overly bright smile. "We're so pleased you survived your ordeal. We have accommodations prepared for you both while we sort out the details of your repatriation." "Separate accommodations," added the Thyrosian representative coolly. "It would be inappropriate for you to continue cohabitating until the situation is properly assessed." Elena felt Kethnor's tension spike, his bioluminescent patterns flashing. "Warning colors, we are bonded," he said firmly. "According to both human and Thyrosian law, separation of bonded mates is prohibited. But you're not legally bonded," the human official pointed out. "There's no documentation of any formal ceremony." "Love doesn't require documentation," Elena said, stepping closer to Kethnor's side. "And our child certainly doesn't require your approval to exist." The standoff might have continued indefinitely if not for the arrival of an unexpected advocate. Dr. Sarah Chen, Elena's former supervisor from the Colonial Botanical Survey, pushed through the crowd of officials with characteristic determination. "Elena," she called out, pulling her into a fierce hug. "Thank God you're alive and pregnant." She pulled back to look at Elena's belly with amazement. "The report said it was impossible." "Apparently not," Elena laughed, tears of relief streaming down her face. "Sarah, this is Kethnor, my partner, the father of my child," Dr. Chen extended her hand to Kethnor with a warm smile. "It's an honor to meet you. Elena's always been special. But this is going to change everything." Her presence seemed to shift the dynamic. As a respected scientist with political connections, Dr. Chen carried weight that the bureaucrats couldn't ignore. Within hours, she had arranged for Elena and Kethnor to be housed together in a comfortable suite while the various governmental bodies figured out how to handle their unprecedented situation. "You've stirred up quite a hornet's nest," Dr. Chen told them over dinner. "Half the scientific community wants to study your child, and the other half doesn't believe it's possible. The politicians are trying to figure out how to spin this for diplomatic advantage." "What do you think we should do?" Elena asked. "Go public," Dr. Chen said without hesitation. "Tell your story before others tell it for you. Control the narrative." And so, in a move that shocked both their respective governments, Elena and Kethnor agreed to a joint interview with the Galaxy News Network. The reporter, a seasoned journalist named Marcus Webb, had covered interspecies relations for decades. "This is truly unprecedented," Webb said as cameras rolled. "Can you tell us how your relationship developed?" Elena and Kethnor shared a look, then began to tell their story. They spoke of the crash, their initial mistrust, the gradual development of respect and friendship, and finally, love. Kethnor's bioluminescent patterns shifted throughout the interview, providing a stunning visual representation of his emotions as he spoke. "And the pregnancy?" Webb asked gently. "How did you both react when you realized?" "With wonder," Elena said simply, "and with determination to give our child the best possible future." "What kind of future do you envision for them?" Kethnor spoke up, his voice strong and clear. "A future where love is stronger than prejudice, where the differences between species are celebrated rather than feared, where a child can